One gray, drizzly afternoon in November, I had just finished shooting in the neighborhood of Washington Square Park. In the gathering darkness, the park was bustling with people getting out of work, students going to evening classes, and the new batch of junkies who came out only after sunset. I had shot footage of so many homeless people in the last few months that I wouldn't have paused to notice this man if it weren't for the fact that it was beginning to sprinkle harder, and he was on his knees, with a cardboard sign that said, "Help me, I'm hungry," around his neck, and his hands in a prayer position, his face, eyes shut, pointed upwards to the inhospitable sky. He was bearded, with long ash-blonde hair, and as emaciated and broken as one of Gauguin's Christs. I stopped to get my camera ready, and as I moved closer, I saw that the man looked familiar. It was Sebastian. I wouldn't call myself a compassionate guy. I mean, I give money to beggars once in a while, depending on my mood, especially if they don't look like crackheads. But I'm not like some of my friends who work in soup kitchens or in the winter take sandwiches and blankets to the people sleeping in dark alleys or train stations. And yet I couldn't ignore Sebastian. And not because he had been my student and I was fond of him, but because I was so sure of his talent. I stood there, waiting for Sebastian to open his eyes. I was getting drenched, and it looked like he was lost in his thoughts, so I said, "Sebastian, it's me, Santiago, your film teacher." He smiled, though now his teeth were brown and cracked. His eyes lit up, not with too much recognition, but with the nirvana of dementia. I took his grimy hand in both of mine and pressed it warmly, even though I was repulsed by his filth. At that moment I became aware of the cold rain, the passers-by, the hubbub of city traffic, the throng of the New York City dusk on fall evenings, when New Yorkers rush around in excitement on their way to places, to bright futures and unreasonable hopes, to their loved ones and home. I locked my hands around his, as if to save him, as if to save myself from the thunderbolt of pain that had lodged in my chest. Hi, Prof, Sebastian said finally. "You have to get out of this rain or you'll get sick," I said, yanking at his hand, coaxing him to get off the sidewalk. Okay, he acquiesced apologetically as he got up. Sebastian stood with shoulders hunched, his head leaning to one side, looking downward. There was a strange, utterly disconnected smile on his lips, the insane, stifled giggle of a child who'd been caught doing something naughty, a boy who feels both sorry about and amused at his antics, the smile of someone who had a sense of humor, but doesn't believe that they have the right to smile. Sebastian had become passive, broken, a frightened little battered dog. Fear darted in his eyes. "Would you like to come to my place for a cup of coffee?" I asked. "Thanks," he replied, avoiding my eyes. Gently, so not to scare him, I removed the cardboard sign from around his neck. I hailed a cab. On the way home we were silent. I rolled down the window because Sebastian's stench was unbearable. Part of me wished I had given him a few bucks and gone on with my business. Inside the apartment, I said, "You better get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia." I asked him to undress in my room, gave him a bathrobe, and told him to take a shower. He left his dirty clothes on the floor, and while he was showering, I went through the pockets of his clothes, looking for a clue to his current condition. There were a few coins in his pockets, some keys, a glass pipe, the kind crackheads used to smoke in doorways. The pipe felt more repugnant in my hand than a rotting rodent. It was like an evil entity that threatened to destroy everything living and healthy. I dropped it on the bed and went to the kitchen. There I washed my hands with detergent and scalding water. I was aware that I was behaving irrationally, but I couldn't control myself. I returned to my bedroom, where I piled up his filthy rags and made a bundle, put them in a trash bag, and dumped them in the garbage. Sebastian and I were almost the same height, but he was so wasted he would swim in my clothes. But at least he'd look clean, I thought, as I pulled out of my closet thermal underwear, socks, a pair of jeans, a flannel shirt, and an olive army jacket that I hadn't worn in years. I wanted to get rid of his torn, smelly sneakers, but his shoe size was smaller than mine. I laid out all these clothes in the bed and went to the kitchen to make coffee and sandwiches. When I finished, I collapsed on the living room couch and turned on the TV. Sebastian remained in my bedroom for a long time. Beginning to worry, I opened the door. He was sitting on my bed, wearing the clean clothes and staring at his image in the full-length mirror of the closet. His beard and hair were still wet and unkempt, but he looked presentable. "Nice shirt," he whispered, patting the flannel on his shoulder. "It looks good on you," I said. Now that he was clean and dressed in clean clothes, with his blonde hair and green eyes, he was a good-looking boy. We sat around the table. Sebastian grabbed a sandwich and started to eat slowly, taking small bites and chewing with difficulty, as if his gums hurt. I wanted to confront him about the crack, but I didn't know how to do it without alienating him. Sebastian ate, holding the sandwich close to his nose, staring at his lap all the time. He ate parsimoniously and drank his coffee in little sips, making strange slurping noises, such as I imagine a thirsty animal would make. When he finished eating, our eyes met. He stood up. "Thanks. I'm going, okay?" "Where are you going?" I asked. "It's raining. Do your parents know how to reach you?" "My parents don't care," he said without animosity. "Sebastian, I'm sure they care. You're their child and they love you." I saw he was becoming upset, so I decided not to press the point. "You can sleep here tonight. My couch is comfortable." Staring at his sneakers, he shook his head. "That's cool. Thanks anyway. I'll see you around." "Wait," I said. I rushed to the bedroom for the jacket. I gave it to him and an umbrella, too. Sebastian placed the rest of his sandwich in his side pocket and put on the jacket. He grabbed the umbrella at both hands and studied it, as if he had forgotten what it was used for. I scribbled both my home and office numbers on a piece of paper. "You can call me anytime you need me," I said, handing him a $10 bill, which I gave with some apprehension because I was almost sure he would buy crack with it. Sebastian took the number but returned the money. "It's yours," I said. "Please take it." "It's too much," he said, surprising me. "Just give me enough for coffee." I fished for a bunch of coins in my pocket and gave them to him. Hunching his shoulders and giving me his weird smile, Sebastian accepted them. Suddenly I knew what the smile reminded me of. It was Charlie Chaplin's smile, as the tramp in City Lights. Sebastian opened the door and took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. The following day I went back to the corner where I'd found him the day before, but Sebastian wasn't around. I started filming in that neighborhood exclusively. I became obsessed with finding Sebastian again. I had dreams in which I'd see him with dozens of other junkies tweaking in murky alleys of New York. Sometimes I'd spot a young man begging who, from the distance, looked like Sebastian. This, I know, is what happens to people when their loved ones die. Next part. Part 4. That Christmas, I took to the streets again, ostensibly to shoot more footage, but secretly to find Sebastian. It was around that time that the homeless stopped being for me the anonymous human roaches of urban squalor. Now there were people with features, with faces, with stories, with loved ones desperately looking for them, trying to save them. No longer moral lepers to be shunned, the young among them especially fascinated me. I wonder how many of them were intelligent, gifted, even geniuses, who, because of the crack or other drugs, or rejection, or hurt, or lack of love, had taken to the streets, choosing to drop out in the worst way. The documentary and my search for Sebastian became one. The search took me to places I had never seen before. I had started to ride the subway late at night, filming the homeless who slept in their cars, seeking warmth, traveling all night long. Most of them were black, and many of them were young. A great number seemed insane. I became adept at distinguishing the different shades of street people. The ones around 42nd Street looked vicious, murderous, possessed by the virulent devils of the drugs. The ones who slept in the subways of Port Authority, Grand Central, Penn Station were poorer, did not deal in drugs or prostitution. Many of them were cripples or retarded, and their eyes didn't flash the message, kill, kill, kill. I began to hang outside the city shelters where they passed in the nights. I looked for Sebastian in those places, in the parks, the waterfronts of Manhattan, under the bridges, anywhere these people congregate. Sebastian's smile, the one he had given me when he left my apartment, hurt me like an ice pick slamming at my heart. One Saturday in April, I was on my way to see Blake, a guy I had met recently in the soup kitchen when I started doing volunteer work. Since I was a half hour early, and the evening was pleasant, the air warm and inviting, I went to Union Square Park to admire the flowers. I was sitting on a bench facing east, when Sebastian passed me by and sat on the next bench. Though it was too warm for it, he was still wearing the jacket I had given him in the winter. He was carrying a knapsack, and in one hand it looked like what was a can of beer wrapped in a paper bag. He kept his free hand on the knapsack as if to guard it from thieves, and with the other hand he took sips from his beer, all the while staring at his riding sneakers. Seeing him in that jacket was very strange. It was as though he was wearing a part of me, as if I had borrowed one of my limbs. I debated on whether to approach him, or just to get up and walk away. The last couple of months, since I met Blake, my obsession with finding Sebastian had lifted. I got up. I'll finish the rest in part 3.